interact with our with the foods we eat, and it's to me an interesting thing. It's maybe as much fun as it is anything else. I don't take it very seriously, but something that I found gave me insight into certain things that where I felt like my body was not being able to process certain foods. This at least made sense. Um, and so there is what this company offers is a pre-counseling and a post-counseling. That's additional. I would absolutely recommend the post-counseling. And if you do want to understand what this thing can do for you, do the pre-counseling. But the post-counseling is critical because these are like 60, 70-page reports, and you require someone to help you understand what to take out of it. You contact the person, and we'll be, of course, putting this on the community, so you don't have to copy anything down. It'll all be sent. And uh, and just mention you're part of the longevity lab, so you get that discounted rate that you see on the screen. It's a reasonably good discount. And as always, we take no cuts or commissions. We just do these deals so that you benefit from it. So if you find this interesting and worth doing, you can take advantage of it. All right. Our speaker for next week is Dr. Hilary Lynn. She's based in New York, but she's a longevity physician trained at Stanford, and I find her LinkedIn posts. If you're not following her on LinkedIn, I would highly recommend it. She has very practical approaches to longevity rather than the hype-filled ones that we all see many of. And so we'll be speaking with her next week. It's going to be quite an interesting conversation. All right. To the guests of honor, we have both Renu and Nirmal, and I'm going to just put their names up over here, but most of you have heard them, spoken to them, and benefit from the Brown Heart community. So not only did they create this amazing documentary called The Brown Heart, which if you haven't watched it and you're in the US, you can go onto YouTube. If you're in India, it plays on Geo. And so Geo Hotstar, I think it's a must watch. I've watched it twice, and I can't recommend it highly enough. So there is the documentary, but there's also the community. And just like we have our community, there's the Brown Heart community that's focused on increasing awareness and providing great insights into heart health. And so if you're not a member of that, I think that's something you should also consider, and we'll make sure to include a link to the Brown Heart community in our show notes. All right. And so without further ado, I just want to welcome both Renu and Nirmal and say that every time they've been on it, which like I said, for Renu, it's a third time, and for Nirmal, it's the second time. Each time, the feedback that we got was excellent. And that's why, I keep going back to them and saying, can we do one more? And they're gracious enough to always accept the invite. And so today's session is a little bit unique in the sense that typically there's much more of a conversation with the first 45 minutes and then Q&A. This time we have Q&A from the beginning. And thanks to all of you who sent in your questions up front. And if you didn't get a chance, like I said, please type them away in the chat window and we'll do our best to get to them as well. So Renu, Nirmal, welcome to the community once again. So let's start with maybe some foundational questions that might, like Nirmal said earlier, answer a few of the other questions, and then we'll still go through the ones that have not been answered. Let's start with question number one. Why are South Asians at such high risk for heart disease, even at younger age, even at lower BMIs compared to other groups?
You're on mute.
Nirmal, I think you're on mute. Can't hear you. Not yet. I can hear your lips moving, but
We were just
What
hearing you
about
before.
now?
yeah, now we can hear you.
My apologies. My apologies. So yeah. So I can start with that, and then Renu can continue on with the next series of questions. So in a nutshell, I guess in some ways we do have a genetic predisposition to cardiac disease. However, that genetic predisposition is limited. By that, I mean, if you were to, at a very simplistic level, think what is the relative contribution of genes versus everything else, lifestyle, it's placed at about 10 to 15%, right? With when you put the evidence together. Now, those who are prone clearly are prone. However, repetitively, studies have shown that those who are prone, you can override that propensity to develop cardiac disease inherent in South Asians by good lifestyle. So there was this wonderful study from Harvard that showed that people who, based on their genetic scores, polygenic risk scores, were found to be at high risk, and they indulged in a healthy lifestyle, like your forum encourages, that they can get their risk to the exact same level as those who are born with a low genetic risk. So we always like to say, please don't blame the genes on bad outcomes, because you can modify that outcome. So I'm going to pause there. And then the second part of it is what else really causes it? At the root cause, while there are many that almost all of them are lifestyle driven in many ways, inherent to many of those is one commonality. We as South Asians have a tendency to put on more what's called visceral fat, which is fat in deep parts of your organs, in the belly, around the heart, around the liver, and so on. And there is a much bigger, larger explanation for that beyond the scope of today. But needless to say, we are more prone to do that. And that in turn makes us more prone to lifestyle diseases, diabetes, blood pressure, other hypertension, other issues. On top of all of that, there are three others that we kind of invite upon ourselves in some way, right? Where that is stress, number one, so exposure to stress. Number two, for those living in India and several other parts of the world, air pollution in India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh, particularly so. And thirdly, lack of sleep. So that's kind of in a nutshell the list of kind of reasons why South Asians develop heart disease so commonly.
And Nirmal, based on what you just said, and I'll come back to you. One of the phrases that's been used, and I think it's really good you made the point you made, which is genes play a role, but let's not overemphasize the role it plays and be a victim of it. And the saying I've seen that I think best captures this is, genes load the gun, but lifestyle pulls the trigger, right? We still
Absolutely.
have to do make the lifestyle changes that will either benefit us or hurt us.
Absolutely. Well said. And I think that's exactly true.
So then only one thing I do want to add to that, because the reason we gain so much more visceral fat, especially in the belly, is also because we are born with low muscle mass. So the disease starts actually at the beginning. And there's a lot of evidence with Dr. Yajnik data from Pune that when they measured kids between the European born and the Indian born, there was low muscle mass in the Indian born babies, and an MRI of the abdomen at that age when they were born showed a higher fat in the abdomen. So this starts from the very beginning. And the problem is that we do not do exercise. We do not build muscle mass. So as we continue to age, even at a childhood obesity level, younger level, we have much lower muscle mass and much more visceral fat, which leads to, I think, which is one of the primary reasons why we get heart disease so much earlier.
Yeah, no, I think, this is a fascinating study. I had not heard of this at a young age, the study being showing the difference in muscle mass. I guess that's some of the genetic part that is a disadvantage. But, I also think about when we were growing up and even now, how often are kids told to exercise isn't defined as anything to do with strength training. It's defined as cardio only. And cardio doesn't build muscle mass. It's great for other reasons, but not for muscle mass. But I think the clear takeaway from this for all of those on the call who have younger kids is make sure they're engaging in things that also doesn't mean go to the gym and start lifting heavy weights, but do things that help sort of overcome this disadvantage we are born with.
No, actually, it is recommended to start exercise before 2 years of age, and that actually builds a healthy habits. And that could be just a swimming and taking them to gymnastic, or having run and running outside with them, or jumping. Simple exercises will start to build muscle mass, and that's where the first start of prevention of heart disease.
Yeah. Let's move to a second question then. How do risk markers like ApoB, LP(a), triglyceride to HDL ratio, and insulin resistance differ in importance compared to standard cholesterol tests that are, typically done? I mean, it's like, I don't know about other parts, but I know here in California, I have to wring someone's neck to have them do these other things. Otherwise, it's the standard panel.
Do you want me to take that?
Yeah, go ahead, Renu.
Okay. So the bottom line again in South Asians, beside the lipid factor, and I think we speak about that very well in the documentary, that we always have borderline levels, borderline LDL, borderline triglyceride, and borderline low HDL, which is a good cholesterol. LDL is the bad cholesterol, and triglycerides are not directly related to heart, but more in diabetics than non-diabetics. And they go up with any kind of fatty food. So we have borderline levels of all three of them, which are often all by primary care doctors. They are said, oh, yeah, okay, you don't need to worry about them. But what we don't realize is that South Asians as a whole, again, this is genetic, that we have a high LP(a), which is another LDL cholesterol particle, which is much more atherogenic than the regular LDL. And almost 25% of South Asians have high LP(a). And if you do not measure it, you're not going to find it. And because of the property of this small, dense particle, you have a much higher risk of getting heart attack at a younger age. And along with that is the apolipoprotein B, which works in the same component. And Priyanka, on the last week on our Brown Heart, explained that so well that it actually counts all the particles inside the vessel wall or inside the blood you have. So it's a much better marker than the regular lipid panel to see if that's a marker for heart disease. So LP(a) and apolipoprotein B should be tested on every South Asian. You can decide the age between 30 and 40, or if you have borderline abnormal level, if your LDL is 70 or below, I think you're good. But any LDL around 100, which is borderline and not treated by any physician, should point yourself to get an LP(a) and apolipoprotein B check. Now, insulin resistance, a little bit different approach. So what happens is insulin resistance, again, because of visceral fat, is very common in South Asians. And the first marker of insulin resistance is early pre-diabetes. But some people say, already the horse is out of the barn by the time you have developed pre-diabetes and your fasting glucose starts to go up, or your 2-hour glucose tolerance test starts to go up. But those are the two markers which are regularly recommended as a marker of insulin resistance to test for prediabetes, either fasting or 2-hour glucose or a hemoglobin A1C. So those are the simple things we start with. If those are abnormal, you don't need to do anything else because you already have developed prediabetes, you already have the marker there. But in some patients, especially PCOS, which is again very high risk in our community, and with the visceral obesity, the insulin levels, I don't trust fasting insulin levels as much as I trust the C-peptide, fasting C-peptide, because that's a marker of long-term, like all day long, what your insulin levels are. We still do that fasting, and we only do that one time and not again and again and again. And if your C-peptide level is really very high, even if you have a normal glucose level, that is a marker of insulin resistance. Now, people go back and do HOMA and insulin levels after meals. There's so many things you can do, but those are all available in research and not on a day-to-day basis, unless you're willing to pay and do it. But I would suggest that start with a pre-diabetes test. If that's there, you don't need to do. You have insulin resistance and you know it. But if you don't have that, and if you have severe obesity and PCOS especially, and you're interested in using other medications to improve, then you can do a fasting C-peptide and a fasting glucose at the same time, just one time.
Got it. And so for everyone listening, if you're not getting at least the ApoB and LP(a) done on your thing, LP(a) has to be only done once, right?
Yeah.
Whereas the ApoB has to be done on an ongoing basis. Make sure to ask your doctor for it because you're South Asian. And if that's not convincing enough, go talk to a different doctor.
Yeah, well, and just one thing to add is if your LDL levels are clearly elevated, meaning they're over 130, they're clearly elevated, and or you are already on a statin and doing everything else, there is no other reason at that point to do an LP little a or ApoB at that point, because you are one way or another, you are at a higher risk and you will need to be treated.
Yeah. I mean, the intervention that one would find out is already being done, right? And I think that's
Exactly.
your point, right, Nirmal?
Yep.
Got it. Third question. What role does diet play in South Asian heart health? Specifically, how do refined carbs, rice, and traditional ghee/oil choices impact risk? I know this is a big topic on all communities.
Diet is, we are obsessed with diet, aren't we? We really and to some extent rightly so, because as they say in the any fitness community you're part of, they'll tell you that the vast majority of intervention that lead to preventive improvement or lack of bad outcomes is related to diet. And the logic is very simple. If your diet is inappropriate, you're more likely to be generating visceral fat, which we've already talked about the downsides of. So now to the concepts, the high level concepts, we could spend 2 hours on this alone, but the high level concepts on diet are actually, from an Indian diet perspective, are actually pretty straightforward. So number one, total caloric intake is critical, because if you take more calories and you don't expend as much calories, you're going to put on weight and you're going to put on visceral fat. Let's face it. So don't let anyone tell you this is good, this is bad, this is good, this is bad. It's all bad if the total calories are high. So that's one. The second point is, now to the specifics of the calories, proteins are considered good calories. Almost every forum, this has never been controversial, other than if you load yourself with too much and don't drink enough fluids, you might block your kidneys. But beyond that, proteins have never been controversial. What has been controversial is carbohydrates and fat, the relative proportions of these two. And what we found is, again, you need all three for good, healthy nutrition, right? So nothing is good or bad. Again, it's how much and what type. As to how much, it is very clear that fats provide approximately 9 calories per gram, while carbohydrates and fat provide only 4 calories per gram. So if you're going to have more fat, you're going to dump more calories into yourself, and therefore your total calories are going to be impacted. Now to the specifics. On specifics of fat, and this is being debated these days quite a bit in the context of certain Indian foods, is we continue to believe that the total saturated fat intake has to be restricted based on American Heart Association guidelines, and we are strong proponents of that the total amount of saturated fat has to be limited to approximately, what is it? I keep forgetting the percentage, Renu. Yeah, so
Sorry, 7 to 9%.
Yeah, there you go. Thank you. So the point being, saturated fats have to be restricted. Anything that is solid on room temperature as far as saturated fat is saturated fat. So essentially that has to be restricted to a certain amount. And things like ghee fall in that category. So if you have a very small amount that constitutes 7% or less, that's cool. But if you go much above that, from a cardiac standpoint, that's not a good thing. So that's the second thing. The third thing, which is actually the subject of a lot of intense both research as well as activity, has been what I would broadly call surges in blood sugar after you eat a certain type of carbohydrates. So certain carbohydrates like plain sugar, juices, processed juices, and so on, will cause your blood sugar to go up rapidly. There'll be a blood sugar spike. And foods that do similar kinds of things cause what's called vessel inflammation, essentially a swelling of the blood vessel wall, which has been very strongly linked to heart disease, right? So carbohydrates that do that, simple carbs, processed foods, so on and so forth, will cause that and are bad from a cardiometabolic standpoint. Other carbs that cause a slower elevation of your blood sugar, for example, millets compared to rice, will have what's called a higher a lower glycemic index. So essentially they will cause the blood sugar spike to be more blunted. They're still carbs, they still have calories, but they will not cause as much of a rapid elevation. Similarly, if you kind of trick the system to use a simple carb but have some fiber along with it, right? Salad, any other form of fiber, that again blunts the immediate blood sugar response and causes that food to become inherently safer from a cardiometabolic standpoint, right? So those are the things. And if you look at Indian diet, it has a sort of what we, Renu and I, call a quadruple whammy in some ways, right? Very high carbohydrate, very high fat, particularly from deep frying. And the third component, which we neglected to mention right now, is within the fats, not just the saturated fat, but certain types of fats are called trans fats that have been banned in most countries. And deep frying, particularly in high heat, generates trans fat. And the classic offenders, which we harp on in the film, are things like jalebi and samosa, right? Because they have a very high component of trans fat and they essentially hurt the vessel wall. So those are some of the factors that go into what we would broadly say a poor diet pattern that leads to the high risk for cardiometabolic complications, including heart attacks.
Nikhil, before you move on to another question, there were just two quick questions related to that. Somebody asked about coconut oil and the other person asked about what is the minimum age of exercise for the gym. So if you think about Americans, they take their kids to beach at 3 months of age. So, I'm not saying that there is a very lower limit of exercise, but gymnastic, even here, starts at 2 to 2.5 years of age. So it's not a problem. And again, you don't have to take them to gym. You can do any kind of exercise with them and just start to build their muscle masses. Even, having them lift things at home, whatever works for the muscle mass strength will work for them. And coconut oil, in fact, I was going to put it into our Brown Heart community. There is a living example yesterday. So coconut oil has even more saturated fat than the ghee and the butter both. So ghee has 65 to 70% saturated fat, butter has 70 to 75%, coconut oil has 80 to 85% saturated fat. And there was a lady who actually just stopped coconut oil using last year after, doing all the research work, and also stopped goat meat, which is the red meat, which is plain saturated fat. And cholesterol number went down from 212 to 148 in 1 year, with an LDL dropping from 120 to 55 or 65, very low number. I mean, a living example of just changing coconut oil and goat curry. So again, coconut oil is a full saturated fat, and I would not recommend cooking in coconut oil.
Great. Well, that's good. We have addressed a question right there. And, to the question about kids and increasing their muscle mass, great way to get to a double or twofer is have them help with groceries. Pick the groceries and carry them. You get them to build their strength and add help around the house as well.
Yeah, and I might add, I think in the same question, Raj Mohan added that, and I know why he was referring to it in the context of Kerala. Kerala, by the way, is a hotbed for cardiac disease in India, and one of our very strong advocates in the Brown Heart community, who's done this research for about 40 years now, Dr. Enos, is from Kerala, and he talks about that all the time, and he talks about coconut oil all the time, and laments the fact that his fellow Keralites are so oblivious to dietary habits and high incidences of cardiac disease.
Yeah, no, I think I'm glad you addressed that as well, because it's the whole argument of my 90-year-old grandmother didn't do any of this and she has lived so long. Why am I doing it? Well, live like your grandmother is the joke, right?
Yeah.
So the next question is vegetarianism protective for heart health, or can it increase risk if protein and micronutrient gaps exist?
Go ahead, Renu.
Yeah. Okay. So again, vegetarianism is good if you have a lot of grains, a lot of proteins, and a lot of whole grains, not white grains. And unfortunately, vegetarianism does not give you enough protein, no matter how you try. And then we have this contaminated vegetarian where you deep fry and eat everything. So you're actually adding more super saturated fat, which is not good for you. So micronutrient will be low, macronutrients, especially the proteins, will be low in vegetarian food. Many of them, like most vegetarians, have vitamin B12 deficiency because we just don't get enough vitamin B12. Even vitamin D, because salmon is a very big source of vitamin D, so you don't get vitamin D. And protein, I myself suffer with this all the time, because a lentil will give you 15 grams of 10 to 15 grams of protein. Even if you eat 3 lentils per day, which we don't, it's 45 grams. And on an average, women after menopause need somewhere between 50 to 100 grams of protein, and men need even more. So how do you get that? So you have to have added sources of protein for vegetarians, like a paneer. It has big fat, but if you do low fat paneer, you cut out the fat, but you add protein. Tofu, almost similar like lentil. I thought it's a much big source of protein, but actually has similar like lentils, but it does give you 10 to 15 grams of protein in 100 grams of tofu. Then if that doesn't work, soybean seeds and soya nuggets, big source of protein. And some other things which I can think about, mushrooms and macanas have decent source of protein, which we don't realize. So if you can get through all of this, a protein supplement has to be done. You can do plant-based protein supplements, you can do plant-based protein powder, you can do Greek yogurt. And in our community, we wrote that I make my home plant-based protein powder, which has bhuna chana, almond seeds, hemp seeds, chia seeds, sunflower seeds, and I make a powder and I add it to my regular yogurt or my milk every day. But you have to add 3-4 tablespoons to get there. So it is difficult, and that's where the vegetarianism diet becomes bad or not sufficient, I would say, but we don't have a choice about that. So you have to make sure that you get at least 50 to 60 grams of protein per day minimum, and preferably 80 to 100 to build up muscle mass.
Yeah. And I just want to add to that. I eat chicken, but otherwise I'm mostly vegetarian. And I find that at least 3 to 4 days a week, I have to rely on a protein powder. Of course, low in sugar, all the good stuff about protein powders, but I could not find a way around that.
Yeah.
That was one. And second is Greek yogurt or non-fat yogurt with, berries thrown in there and chia seeds thrown in there. And also the same thing thrown into the protein powder, the protein shake.
Yeah.
It gives it the nice carbs, makes it tastier, but you get your protein through that as well. And so, anybody who's struggling with protein, the points made by Renu and a couple of these other things are things you could do pretty easily and yet make it tasty, because the last thing you want to do is do something that feels like punishment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. What I do is I just do air fried tofu and just keep it. And sometimes I will just add it to my dal.
Yeah. I know we've spoken about this, but just, there's this whole zone 2, zone 5, and people think, well, zone 2 is not really exercise. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I can, excuse me, I can take that. So it's interesting. There is obviously, I'll just preface this by saying that there is a lot written about exercise physiology and what it does to your body, right? And fitness experts will tell you all kinds of stuff, broadly related to fitness. As a physician, though, with a slightly different lens, not necessarily just of fitness, but also prevention of disease. And in today's context, this is germane in the context of prevention of cardiac disease. So I'm now looking at it from the lens of prevention of cardiac disease. So 2 or 3 things are known, and then there is a whole bunch of stuff that's not well known, that's just not published. So there may be physiologic benefits, by all means go do it, but I don't know if that has cardioprotective benefits or not. So that's my preface. Now to the specifics. A few things are known to work from a cardio prevention standpoint. And in that context, number 1, broadly speaking, aerobic exercise zone 2 or more, which is 60 to 65% of your maximum predicted heart rate or higher, right? So if you do zone 2, there is a linear effect of the more you do, the better it is. Right? So that's broadly called the area under the curve. So if you do more for 2-3 hours, you get more benefit than if you do, say, 25 minutes or 30 minutes. Most of us don't have time more than 25 to 30 minutes. So that's still very, very cardioprotective. And American Heart Association guidelines, as you know, is 150 minutes a week minimum. So if you do more, that's a good thing. So that's zone 2 out of the way, right? Now, the thought process has been that high intensity interval training, meaning going to 3, 4 and higher with intense activity that gets your heart rate up for short periods of time, that gets your heart rate up to zone 4, 3, 4, or even more than that for a short period of time, offers cardioprotection. And in that context, That is also known. High intensity interval training in the context of prevention of is also well known. Now to the fitness parts of this, in terms of both losing visceral fat, there is also a linear curve in losing visceral fat. And the hypothesis is that the more visceral fat you lose, odds are that you will have a cardioprotective effect, albeit not directly proven, meaning this causes this, right? But we do know exercise in that context, area under the curve being more, you lose more visceral fat, and biologic plausibility will be that you will be more protected. But we don't know the direct relationship in that context. So that's the second thing. The third thing is that overall, the take-home message to me is most of us who are regular mortals have limited time, right? If we had unlimited time, we could do anything we wanted. With limited time, you have 2 or 3 options. One is high-intensity interval training for 10 to 15 minutes every single day, right? Your second option is zone 2 exercise on a regular treadmill and so on for at least 30 minutes, 5 days a week minimum. Then you can obviously go more on that. That'll get you about 1,500. All of these have equivalent benefits to the best of our knowledge. And then all that being said, the more you do, the better it is.
Yeah. And I think, you made a couple of very important points that I want to reiterate for the listeners. One is that this 150 minutes a week is a minimum. And there is value in it going higher and higher, at least up to a certain point.
Yes.
Yeah. And a similar thing has been written, for example, about steps, right? The research around steps is, going from 7,000 is sort of minimum, 10,000 you get more benefits, but beyond a certain point, it flattens and maybe even goes down because you're, overdoing it.
Yes.
So that was one point. Second point is there has been a VO2 max, which is, you can get it from both zone 2 and zone 5, but zone 5 pushes it higher. The results of how well it correlates to all-cause mortality has been well proven. And so I think that 10 minutes a day of getting a heart rate high is important. And 10 minutes is not that much. If someone said do it for an hour every day, okay, very impractical. But 10 minutes a day, find ways, like just suddenly run for for a couple of minutes and it goes up and it does make a difference. And
and I can add to that, my daily exercise routine, I used to fear the thought of running. For some reason, my shins would hurt and I would find it very difficult. I would do treadmill without a problem, elliptical without a problem. But with the beautiful weather out there, particularly on this end of our country, these days, you enjoy that good weather most of the time, but we don't. So at this time of the year on the East Coast, where the weather is great, when I would get out, I would love to run, but I was unable to. So what I began to do was short spurts of running and then brisk walk, then short spurts of running, then brisk walk. So this morning I did 45 to 50 minutes of that. And that's what I do fairly regularly when the weather is good out there.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important point because you're effectively doing what is typically called HIIT, right?
Yes.
High intensity interval training. And it's a lot more practical for most of us to do, right? Not everybody's a runner who can run 45 minutes at a high heart rate, but 2 minutes of running, then 3 to 4 to 5 minutes of walking, again 2 minutes of running. I think this is a very practical thing to do. And I think I also want to make another point. This thing that you spoke about, being fit and being healthy are two different things. And it's very easy to confuse, oh, that guy is so fit, means he is healthy. Not true. Yeah. Right? And so I think that's an important distinction for us to keep in mind.
Yeah, one of the quick thing I do for everyone, and I think because I have 15, 20 minutes sometime, and if I walk, I have to walk for an hour to get the same thing. But for HIIT, there's so many videos available on television. So I just moved down. I started with 50 plus, and then I went to 40 plus, and now I do 30 plus. So just 15, 20 minutes of quick HIIT gets my heart rate up. So at least I've done some routine, which is done. And then after that, whatever I do is bonus.
Renu, these numbers you mentioned were age?
Yeah, they're 50 plus.
So you're going in reverse.
Yeah, so I'm going reverse. I started with 50 plus, then I went to 40 plus, and now I'm going to 30 plus because my body has now gotten used to it.
That's amazing, right? It just shows it's never too late to start, and you can show big gains.
Yeah, you can.
Does stress, I mean, we've spoken about stress, you referred to it earlier, Nirmal, particularly work stress, cultural expectations, all of that contribute? Like, is there been shown to be a very clear mechanism for how stress converts?
So I think the Brown Heart documentary very clearly shows where Dr. Mohit Gupta in Delhi has actually done actual research on people who had heart attack between age 20 to 30, and they had no other risk factor, including lipids, genetic diabetes, hypertension. The only thing was stress. They were under significant stress, which most of the youngs are nowadays, working 12, 14, 16-hour jobs. So he actually measured their telomere length. And the telomere length in those people was equivalent to a biological age of 60 to 75 years. Now, the telomere length actually tells you how young or old you are. So if you have a short telomere length, that means you're older. If you have a decent telomere length, that means you're younger. So these 150 patients had a telomere length so low that they were equivalent to a biologic age of 60 to 75, which talks about the actual physical impact of stress, which can cause cardiac disease. The second thing, of course, is we all know with stress, the first thing that goes up is cortisol. And cortisol is a fat attractive hormone. So it attracts fat, it attracts obesity, it attracts your bad things in your system. Plus, it increases adrenaline, so you're rushed all the time. So you get vasoconstricted. So there is physical evidence with stress that you will get more problem with, especially the cardiac-related disease. So there's actually clear evidence. The cultural expectations, yes. I mean, the long hours, yes. I mean, where do you draw the line is actually very difficult. And we've all done that in our younger age when we keep doing for somebody or the other and not take time for ourselves. And I think we're all paying price. And that my heart disease has taught me that lesson, that you have to take care of yourself first. You put the mask on yourself before you put on others.
Yeah, no, well said. Well said. Let me now move to I think this sort of creates a foundation. So I'm going to take some questions. The questions had a lot of detail, but what I've tried to do is extract the key point, because I think then it applies to a lot more people. So one of the people asked, they have a low lipoprotein A, so their numbers are good, healthy. ApoB is about 100, LDL is 160. Statin or lifestyle was really the question.
Yeah, I think I can take that. I did look at that question. Thank you for posting that. It was a great question. And the question, for those of you who didn't read it, is actually very nicely worded. LDL clearly 160, but other parameters relatively okay, in a nutshell, right? So other risk parameters, although that could be debated, some of the parameters were kind of on the higher end. But I will, for this purpose, assume that they were okay, right? So very interestingly, so therefore I'll focus on the LDL for a minute, right? Because everything else was okay. LDL at that level in Asian Indians is a significant problem, right? One thing that you need to remember about LDL is there are wonderful papers out there, and I actually dug up a few this morning after I read that question. Again, just to remind myself where research stood on this topic. And then I was also reminded Dr. Priyanka Satish, who's a preventive cardiologist, she had brought this up at her talk 2 days ago that we had on the Brown Heart. The concept being the absolute LDL reduction causes a reduction in heart attack risk, right? Repetitively, studies have shown if your starting LDL is even 100 and you lower it to 70, the risk of cardiac disease goes down. This bears out all the way down to an LDL level of 25, okay? This reduction. Clearly, I believe none of my fellow Indians should have an LDL above 100, none. Given the volumes of literature on LDL reduction and reduction of cardiac disease, we should all have LDLs less than 100. There is no excuse not to, okay? So the 160 is way too high, regardless of other risk parameters, right? So I would lower the LDL, and I would lower the heck out of that LDL regardless. I would lower that to less than 100 if you are not a diabetic. If you are a diabetic, no ifs, ands, or buts. I want to lower that LDL well below 70, probably around 50. If you've had heart disease, I'd lower that LDL down to less than 55. So the short answer is the absolute LDL reduction is an independent risk-reducing criteria for cardiac disease.
Great.
And you do that by taking a statin, because I think that's the question people may have asked, that, unfortunately, diet only improves the LDL by 10 to 20% at the max. And if you're already a healthy person and you're not using coconut oil and desi ghee for your cooking all day long and deep frying all day long, I don't think the diet change will make that kind of difference. So, and that's my story all my life in my documentary, that I wish I would have done that. So statin is the only way to reduce LDL to get them less than 70 or close to 50. And I think on the similar line, there was another question which talked about LDL being a 100 to 110, but LP little a of more than 100 or 120. So there is no specific, I wanted to address it right now so that we don't get that question. The LP little a, there's no specific drug which is lowering the LP little a right now. There are 3 in the works and they will be approved in the near future. So for South Asian, I think that will be a great help because many of us have high LP little a and borderline LP LDL like 100 to 110. Right now, the only drug that lowers it is Repatha, which is an injectable treatment for LDL. So it's not approved by insurance company unless you have failed all the statins. So the only recommendation right now, and there is at least just 1 or 2 papers on that, shows that if you have an LP little a above 100, you lower your LDL to less than 50. So again, even for that reason, if somebody has an LP little a of 120 and LDL of 100, I would put on a statin to get their LDL down to 50. LP little a is a one-time marker. It doesn't change. It's a genetic marker till we actually have drugs for it. So again, don't take that LP little a lightly, even if your LDL is borderline.
Yeah, that's, and I just want to add a data point to both what Renu and Nirmal said. When I was diagnosed with heart disease 10 years back, my LP little a was 14. So that showed I had, on paper, no real risk. My LDL cholesterol was 125. And yet my calcium score was 266. I went on to statins. Today, my LDL cholesterol is 34.
Yeah.
And so, of course, I'm living a healthier lifestyle. But, I saw what drop I got.
Yeah.
And so, to me, statins are critical for the points that have been mentioned. And that is, if your LDL cholesterol is greater than 100, right? They're like Nirmal said, there's no reason for it to be more than 100. If you have done everything in your power, look, if you have not done the lifestyle things, if you're eating badly, you're not exercising, you're all of that, then yeah, sure, start with that. But if after 3-6 months of doing that, it's still not dropping below 100, I think it's something to seriously consider. And the one thing that has not been given enough importance until recently is the importance of LP little a. Right, my wife has an LP little a of 125, but all our other markers were generally fine. Well, nobody even recommended a statin, but now that thought process is changing pretty rapidly.
I think LP little a is going to be approved sooner than later by the American Heart Association to be done. So I think not even just South Asian, but in other populations as well. So I think that's going to happen. And the other question is on the ratio. Now, I know many doctors still say, oh, the ratio of less than 4 is good. I think for all our fellow Indians, I'd like to see a ratio of less than 2.5. That's why I don't really go by the ratio. I go by more actual LDL values and VLDL values. So
the ratio you're referring to is cholesterol to HDL. Right?
HDL.
Okay.
Yeah,
and the other ratio that's used often is the whole, triglycerides to this thing, right? So I was wondering which one you're talking about.
No, I think that's worthy of mentioning in the South Asian community. Priyanka raised that the other day. Again, that is dated information in the context of Indians. In the context of Indians, absolute LDL reduction trumps pretty much everything else.
And there's a question, Nirmal, if you want to take this, do statins cause mitochondrial dysfunction?
Yeah, I mean, really, two quick things. I think, no, there is very little evidence that statins cause mitochondrial dysfunction. But that being said, actually, I take that back. There is some evidence. I won't use the word mitochondrial dysfunction, but I will say that statins, there is good evidence that statins can cause, when used over the long haul, can cause glucose intolerance. Okay, well known. So everyone agrees on this. This is not at question.
But in high dose.
Well, it can be depending on which data source you look at. Well known. However, what people have done is, in some very elegant papers, they've quantified, on the one hand, what benefits they can offer, and on the other hand, what the potential risk is. And the benefit risk ratio, if you can call it that, the benefit advantage, if you were to quantify it to be about 10 to 12%, the risk percentage is 0.5 to 1%. So the way I tell people and my patients all the time is, would you rather be having a heart attack or getting glucose intolerance in 10 years? Right? So that's a good way to put it. No other. And the other one to mention is people talk about muscle dysfunction and all of that. Long-term, meaning muscle necrosis, rhabdomyolysis, and things like that, bad muscle dysfunction, not just muscle pain, you stop it and it goes. Bad muscle disease, 1 in a million, that's actually less, or I should say rarer than your chance of being hit by lightning.
Yeah. Yeah. And I can speak to the fact that when I went on to statins, my HbA1c went up from 5.9 to 6.2.
Yes.
But that's where, doing making the lifestyle changes helps. And so right now I'm more at like 5.5, 5.6. And so you can overcome
you can overcome that.
Right. Next question. I think this was from Gitanjali. And the crux of this is the non-stop stream of health data freaks me out. Where is that balance one can achieve?
It's a wonderful question. Renu, you want me to take it or?
You can take it.
Yeah. Okay. So the short answer is, I think that if you look at priorities in life in general, what I tell people is, if there is a single priority in life, that's our health, right? So scientific data and evidence, by definition, changes, right? It's a moving target. It changes. What was known 20 years ago, what was conventional wisdom 20 years ago, is no longer conventional wisdom. And sometimes health data changes by the year. We owe it to ourselves to track it, to get smart at it, and to evaluate it through the eyes of scientific evidence. Things like the Longevity Lab is doing, things like the Brown Heart Forums are doing, I tell people, we need to teach people how to fish rather than fish for them and tell them, hey, is this good or bad for you? No, nothing is good or bad for you. You just need to know what is behind the evidence. So I would strongly urge you to stay tuned with evidence, with good quality, high quality scientific evidence, and do everything in your power to stay abreast of it, even though it may seem weird, it may seem contradictory at times, but you owe that to yourself to stay on top of it.
Yeah.
And as far as the health data goes, I think just like people may have questions about how often do I do this test? Do I wear a glucose machine? Do I wear a monitor if I'm not a diabetic? So I think once again, all of this gives you a little window of opportunity to help yourself. So if I am a young person and I'm having a heart attack at 30, I would check everything under the sun to find out why I got a heart attack at 30, right? Because you have still another 60 years to live maybe, and you want to have a quality of life and not get another heart attack at 40 and 50 again. So I think it all depends upon. On the other hand, if you're a 75 years old and you're living healthy and you have no problems and you're doing well, everything, you don't need 10,000 pieces of evidence or data. So I did monitor on myself because again, I had no risk factor, exactly the same story as Nikhil with an LDL, and then I had a CAC score which was positive, and very good lifestyle all my life. So I also went and put a glucose monitor to see if glucose intolerance was causing something in me, right? And it was an eye-opener for me for 2 weeks because makka ki roti and sarson ka saag is my favorite, and I love that as being a Punjabi. And I saw that my sugar went up to 220 after 2 makka rotis, and I said, oh my God, forget it. So what I did next time, I didn't stop eating it. What I did was added some of the chana powder, some of the bajra powder to it, or added some of the wheat powder to it. And instead of 2, I took 1.5 and I ate a bowl of salad, which I do many anyway, but I ate a full bowl of salad before I added the roti. So I think this is how the data should help you. You should not get obsessed with it, but you should learn to look at the data and make to your own, tune, like what will help you with that data.
Yeah. And I'll just add that, I've found that for a lot of people, when they talk about data, they talk about numbers, and numbers can be overwhelming for a lot of people. And so people stay away from looking at variables or even wearing a wearable. I think that is for up to each person. However, to the point that has been made, and that is, if you can spend 10 minutes a day, I don't think 10 minutes a day is too much time for something that is going to impact the rest of your life. To just find a credible source of information, whether it's one of our communities or some influencer who you trust, 10 minutes a day, keep that aside because you are investing in your long-term health, and you'll be happy you did it later. The next question, which I'm sort of combining a few different questions, is there a rule book of sorts of what to eat or not to eat post 50? And really, I'm thinking, Nirmal and Renu, whether there are changes relative to what has already been spoken, right? Have enough protein, make sure there's enough fiber, eat the right carbs, don't go crazy on the wrong fats. And I think those rules are lifelong, correct?
Absolutely. I would just say two things unique to people who are above the age of, not unique, maybe they apply more to people who are above the age of 50. And in some instances, in women only, but in other instances, both men and women. One is in the case of women above the age of 50, postmenopausal women above the age of 50, the role of vitamin D and to some extent calcium, number one. Secondly, if you have lost ground prior to the age of 50, although this is important in everyone, you need to gain ground on protein intake even more so that you can catch up if you need to, because how you spend the last decade of your life will be determined by how much you save up with the amount of protein and muscle mass. So those are the two things that are somewhat unique. I wouldn't even say unique. They're a little more applicable, right? But everything else is the same.
Yeah.
And more muscle strengthening exercises, especially if you have not done so before, like I did. So I think that really help build up the muscle, decrease your visceral fat, and protect you from falling and breaking a bone.
Yeah. So the two clear action items after 50, definitely revisit your protein intake. Don't assume it works so fast, so it'll continue working. Almost definitely you'll have to increase it. And second, do engage in strength training because that works hand in hand with the muscle you take in. So what do findings on the Holter on a Holter monitor mean? Because I know a lot of people are beginning to do it, the Zeo monitors, this and that, and very few people know how to interpret any of that. So any takeaways, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, the short answer is you shouldn't. Don't interpret the Holter yourself. You're just not smart enough. Neither am I. When I say I, meaning as an internist, I'm not smart enough to interpret a Holter in the way that a cardiologist does. So don't go there. Educate yourself by all means. Please do. I'm not suggesting you should be oblivious to what it shows, but please don't try to interpret Holter monitors yourself. Let a cardiologist do it. I always recommend that because there are so many things between the hand and the mouth when it comes to Holter monitoring, right? Is a short string of ventricular ectopy okay? Is a bigger string of atrial ectopy or premature atrial contractions okay, as this person had, which means effectively nothing, but can mean a heck of a lot if you're having repeatedly and long strings in a certain manner, in a certain morphology. So I have learned enough about it that I think I could comment on it, but I refrain from doing so because it's a very specialized area and should be the realm of cardiology.
Yeah, perfect. And then there's another question which may fall in the same bucket, may not. Let me just ask it. Someone who's about 58, lives in India, oximeter, pulse rate varies between 90 to 105, doesn't engage in strenuous physical activity, but yet sees an increase in the evenings. The 2D echo is normal, no adverse findings, stress test result is negative. Does this require medical attention or not? I think this is one of those things people are constantly now beginning to wonder. Am I overreacting or is this the right time?
No, you're not overreacting. I think you're doing the right thing. You are, first of all, congratulations on getting to know yourself. Monitoring your heart rates, knowing where your resting heart rate sits is a very good thing. You're not obsessed. You're very appropriate, number one. Secondly, I think that because the number of factors that influence resting heart rates can be a lot, I still think you need to be evaluated by at least a primary care doctor, if not a cardiologist. Very broadly speaking, resting heart rates that are above 90 do indicate relative quote unquote lack of cardiac fitness, right? Inherent, but there are many things that influence it. As an example, in the person who wrote to us, she has thyroid disease as an example. Where does the TSH sit? Which is why this is a complex thing that deserves medical care and a good medical evaluation. But congratulations to you for identifying it.
Yeah. there was this question asked, and there have been some answers given. HDL being too high, is that a bad thing? It was above 90 in this person's case.
Yeah. Yeah. See, that's why I think the ratio has kind of also partly fallen out of favor. Okay. So HDL, two take home messages. One is a low HDL, right? And that your lab report will show, right? Less than, let's say, 40 in men, 50 in women, or whatever your lab report shows, because that's what's standardized. A low HDL has been well recognized to be an independent risk factor for cardiovascular disease. Okay. Fact one. Fact two, a high HDL has not been proven to be at low risk for cardiac disease, right? It has been assumed that that's the case. So when I used to see people back in the day, they came with HDLs of 90 or 100, I'd say, wow, you're so protected. And I quickly kind of wheeled that back because I was wrong. A low HDL less than the numbers stated are a high risk. Higher HDL numbers, heck, we don't know what that means. And certainly the U-shaped curve has been very well described. Beyond a certain number, for sure, HDL has very little meaning and in fact may even be slightly higher risk. But the short answer is, other than the low HDL being a high risk, we don't know.
And there's a question on the same line. Do statins lower the very high HDL? I don't know the answer to that.
No, they don't. No, they don't.
So
I checked that.
There's nothing that can be done, right?
No, to my knowledge, no. I did some quick review of literature this morning that I didn't find anything, but I'm happy to check that more before dogmatically saying there isn't, because I haven't looked hard enough.
In fact, this is not a question asked here, but somebody I know who otherwise all his markers are fine has an HDL of 6, and it almost felt like that must be some sort of a genetic issue, because how is everything else so good?
Yeah, absolutely. That is kind of interesting. I must admit, I haven't seen that low of an HDL.
But then I think there is a genetic syndrome with low HDL, so we'll have to look more into it, and that has to be familial. And then how they do, we have to dig some more data on it. But
yeah, no, I did some initial digging, and it definitely said that that's only because of a genetic issue, and all the other markers are fine. So, but I mean, there are some pretty funky cases. Just knowing your body, understanding your results is an important thing to do.
So I do have to leave because I have a patient at 12:40, but there are many questions, Nikhil, and if you would just put them, we can answer them on the chat, or Nirmal can answer all of them. They're in the chat before you leave. So I think that way people don't feel that their questions were not answered.
Yeah, no, thank you. We'll make sure to take the questions that we couldn't answer and put them, on the chat, so that then you could answer them there. Maybe can I just ask one last one, and then we can wrap up?
Yeah, Renu, you can log off. I'm happy to stay on.
Yeah, sure. Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Renu.
Yeah.
The question was, LDL level is normal, HDL has been decreasing. What can I do from a food perspective? Like, they were told by their doctor, eat more avocado and consistently exercise. Is that good advice?
To raise the HDL?
Yeah.
So to my knowledge, there is no food item that will raise the HDL. To my knowledge, exercise, and the more you do, in my case, I got my HDL from 33 to about 41 over the years, over about 20 years, 15 to 20 years, by just aggressively exercising over time. But it's just don't take my word on it. Literature suggests that exercise will raise the HDL, aerobic exercise will raise HDL. Beyond that, there is very little. Back in the day, I have had tens and tens of patients on niacin, nicotinic acid, to raise their HDL. But the risk, the side effects were so many with flushing and so on, I stopped using them. I don't use them anymore. But the short thing is exercise. To my knowledge, no food item will raise the HDL.
Yeah, and that's my experience as well. In the last 10 years, my HDL went from 38, which was lower than what it should have been, to now it's closer to 65.
Oh, wow.
And
that's wonderful.
It's all exercise. So
yeah, I believe that. I did not realize that, or I have not seen, but you are not a usual individual. You've exercised a heck of a lot, Nikhil. So that might well be it's a result of that.
Yeah. What are good sources of EPA and DHA for vegans? I've heard about algae oil supplements, but I'm wondering if there are other options or alternatives.
I have no idea. Sorry.
Yeah, maybe we'll put this question to the dietitians and nutritionists to see if
Yep.
they can answer that. There's a question, Nirmal, on stents.
Yes.
I'm sure you've seen this, but effectively, just to phrase it here, how long should the patient be on a blood thinner if they're on a stent in the LAD? How often should patients check if there are other blockages, and how long is stent life?
Yeah. So stents are many different kinds, and I would check with your doctor because I don't want an advice here to be taken as you can stop your blood thinner. Typically, it ranges between 6 to 12 months. Depending on what kind of drug-eluting stent and so on you have in you, right? So that's one thing. And then the question of how often to be tested is, unfortunately, the jury is out. We don't know. So what most people will do is, the general rule of thumb is that for 2 to 3 years, it is unlikely to be having a restenosis of a stent. However, I have repetitively seen in Asian Indians this to be flying in the face of that evidence, right? Meaning that someone who has a stent today in 6 to 8 to 9 months has restenosis, has had severe disease, in one instance had an open heart surgery, right? So I am generally of the opinion that check with your cardiologist and they will talk to you and discuss with you how often that should be done. But there is no one size fits all that you should have stress tests at a certain point and so on and so forth.
Yeah. The number of questions is just exploding. So what we'll do is we'll probably stop here. Nirmal, we'll make sure to put these questions that we could not answer on the community for you to take a look at, you and to look at. But
Yes.
I do want to get a vote from the community members. I enjoyed it. I hope you enjoyed it as well. If you did, show your love. And I think this is the type of thing that makes it all so practical. Nirmal, the way you and Renu answer questions, it just makes it so easy for us, for the common man to understand. Otherwise, a lot of people leave, their doctor's appointment and are like more confused than when they walked in. And I think your style of explanation is always just so lovely. Thank you for doing this, Nirmal. And maybe in a few months, I'll come back and be there with my. Can you please do this again, Nirmal and Renu?
Yeah, happy to do it anytime, Nikhil. It's always a pleasure, and it's always a pleasure to be able to, this is something very close to our heart, and anything we can do to impact even a few lives, we're very fortunate that you gave us this opportunity. Thank you.
Well, thank you, and I hope you're seeing all the love
Yep.
go by. Nirmal.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.